Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. Before the beginning of talks that are going to take place today on the territory of Geneva, both the Russians and the Ukrainians attacked each other with hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles. And telling the truth, both the Russians and the Ukrainians managed to deal significant damage to each other, and as of the morning of the 17th of February of 2026, it is very difficult to say who won the battle. Maybe the Russians managed to deal a bit more damage than Ukrainians, so let's discuss everything and try to understand. So the Ukrainians were the first side who launched another massive attack in the direction of the southern regions of Russia, and this article was published yesterday in the evening, and here we can see the approximate routes of Ukrainian drones that were flying in the direction of the Krasnodarsky Krai. As a result of this attack, according to information we have, the Ukrainians managed to damage the oil refinery, the Ilyinsky oil refinery, and during the night we received several videos with fire. Here we can see the consequences of Ukraine's drone attack, some damage, some fire. Obviously, the oil refinery was just damaged without significant damage, and most likely the oil refinery will be able to continue working. Later, somewhere at 10 a.m. of the morning of the 17th of February of 2026, we received another video, and this time the video was published from the area of the city of Kazan. And here we can see the video that was published by the locals, by people, by the civilians. Here we can see most likely the damage that was dealt to some object of energy infrastructure of the city of Kazan. We can see some energy and electricity anomalies in this area. Later we received the report that most likely the Russians attacked the substation 110 in the area of Verkhny Uzhin. So this most likely substation was attacked, and according to the author of this video, most likely the substation was attacked by an Ukrainian drone. Very difficult to say how exactly the Ukrainians managed to get that, because when talking about even this map of approximate routes of attacks, we see just several drones were flying in this direction. Maybe the Russians haven't managed to bring them down. The Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation during the previous 12 hours made two reports about this attack carried out by Ukrainians. First, the Russians stated that between 8 p.m. and between 8 p.m. and 12 a.m., the Russians managed to bring down 76 drones over different regions and over different parts of the southern direction. And later, more precisely this morning on the 17th of February, the Russians emphasized and added that additional 151 drones were destroyed as well. So as you can see, in total, more than 230 drones were used by Ukrainians during the previous night, and that was one of the biggest attacks from the Ukrainian side. But I would like to point your attention that the Ukrainians launched this attack yesterday, but this attack wasn't the only attack that the Ukrainians have launched since the beginning of the 14th of February. There were at least 4 or 5 waves of attacks carried out by Ukrainians. The Ukrainians were attacking during these days the southern regions of Russia, and the Ukrainians were attacking in the direction of the city of Moscow. In total, up to 800 drones the Ukrainians used since the 14th of February of 2026. The Russians during the previous night also attacked the territory of Ukraine, and this morning we received this picture, this map, where we can see the approximate routes of Russian missiles and drones. According to this map, we can see that the Russians used hundreds of drones. We are talking about yellow lines. The Russians used dozens of cruise missiles of Ha-101 type. We are talking about red lines, and as you can see, most of them were heading towards the western parts of Ukraine, and we have at least 2 orange lines, which means that the Russians attacked the territory of Ukraine also with ballistic Iskander missiles. And we have a lot of explosions around the city of Odessa. Now let's discuss in details what exactly the Russians attacked during the previous night. According to information we have, the Russians attacked the city of Odessa with a significant number of drones and missiles, and the sources report that the Russians attacked the energy substation that is located on the territory of the city itself. So this energy substation was attacked by Russians, and as you can see, there's a very heavy fire, which means that most likely this object of energy infrastructure was completely damaged or even destroyed. The locals and Ukrainian authorities, the Odessa authorities this morning stated that this object of energy infrastructure received significant damage, and most likely it will take time to restore this the functioning of this object of critical infrastructure. Furthermore, during the previous night, the Russians attacked the substation to the south of the city of Kryvyi Rog. We're talking about this territory. First, we received just an article published by different sources that the target of the Iskander-M ballistic missile strike on Kryvyi Rog was the Hirnichna 330 electrical substation. The missile was equipped with a cluster warhead, and later we received this video. Here we can see the route of missile attack. As you can see, this is the black line. This is probably the road of the Iskander missile that hit the target, and here we can see a very huge fire on the horizon. So according to this article, the Russians managed to destroy or to significantly damage this substation as well. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians were attacking objects of energy infrastructure and critical infrastructure of the city of Dnipro. As of the nights between the 16th and the 17th of February, we received just this video where we can see some strikes, fires somewhere on the horizon, and we can see an audio track that tells us about probably explosions and missiles that were flying above this area. But when talking about this map that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, these attacks that took place along the line of combat contact, we're talking about Odessa, Kryvyi Rog, and Dnipro. Let's say the Russians attacked, these attacks weren't the primary attacks of Russians. These attacks were secondary attacks, and the primary attack, the Russians were trying to attack something in the western part of Ukraine. We're talking about the territory between the cities of Stry and Burштyn. So as you can see, the Russians launched in this direction a lot of drones and a lot of missiles. The main purpose of drones that were launched by Russians were to distract attention of Ukraine's air defense. And when talking about missiles, the missiles were tasked to damage and to destroy objects of energy infrastructure. So as for the city of Stry, the source, as you know, there is a very big gas storage that the European countries and Ukraine use for heat purposes and so on, and for industry. So as of the city of Stry, we see according to this map that this region was attacked, but as of the beginning of the 17th of February of 2026, we haven't received anything that can confirm whether the Russians managed to deal damage to any significant damage to any object. But as for the settlement of Burштyn, we haven't received even a single video that can confirm the damage that the Russians managed to deal to the Burштyn power station, but we have this video published this morning by pro-Ukrainian sources, and as you can see here, we can see a lot of vehicles, special vehicles that were heading towards Burштyn power station. As you can see, these are vehicles that serve to stabilize the situation if there is a fire or casualties or something like this. So there is a critical situation, there are problems with heats, and there are power outages recorded through the territory of the settlement, which means that most likely the Russians managed to deal significant damage to the Burштyn power station. But from the other side, pro-Ukrainian sources stated that this night was more or less successful for air defense forces of the armed forces of Ukraine. And you know that recently we've started receiving a lots of videos with the participation of F-16s of the armed forces of Ukraine bringing down Russia's drones and missiles. The pro-Ukrainian sources stated that a lot of drones and missiles in the western part of Ukraine were destroyed by the Ukraine's F-16 crews. And this is a very interesting situation because yesterday in the evening we received a very interesting article published by Western media. Some of the Ukrainian F-16 F-16s are flown by veteran American and Dutch pilots, intelligence online reports. According to the publication, an F-16 squadron has been created in Ukraine, comprising Ukrainian, American, and Dutch pilots. The unit plays a key role in protecting the skies over the Kyiv region. But as for this squadron, we believe that this squadron probably plays a significant role in the protecting of the sky over the western part of Ukraine, but not over the city of Kyiv. So as you can see, the Ukrainians during the previous days managed to improve their air defense, and probably this situation, first of all, is connected not with the situation that Ukrainians are improving their air defense forces and so on. The thing is that between the previous attack and the current attack, it took too many days for Russians for regrouping. I don't know why, but the Russians, for some reason, used a pause between attacks. The last attack took place somewhere at the beginning of February. It seems it was somewhere on the 4th of February of 2026. So the Russians haven't been attacking Ukraine for 2 weeks. And during these 2 weeks, as we can see, the Ukrainians managed to regroup themselves, to bring additional forces. As you can see, the Ukrainians managed to finish the creation of this squadron with Americans and Dutch pilots. And the previous nights, the Ukrainians managed to bring down lots of missiles and drones. As of the morning of the 17th of February, we still haven't received anything on the matter how many missiles and drones the Russians were using, but this morning we received reports published by different experts that the Russians are ready for another and the next massive missile and drone attack, because during the previous night, during this night, the Russians were using just drones and Ha-101 missiles. The Russians haven't used Iskander ballistic missiles. The Russians haven't used Kinzhal missiles. The Russians haven't used the supersonic Ha-22 missiles, so which means that they have another additional batch of weapons and arms to attack Ukraine once again. So, but everything most likely will depend on the results of talks in Geneva. I would like to remind you that today the talks are going to take place between Ukraine's and Russia's and US delegations. They will discuss a peaceful settlement of the conflict. The President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, has already suggested Ukrainians to accept Russia's demands or something, or lots of things will be changed. So that is why everything depends on the first day, and there are very high chances that between the 17th and the 18th of February of 2026, the Russians will carry out another massive missile and drone attack through the territory of Ukraine, and most likely this attack would be much more resultive in comparison with the attack between the 16th and the 17th of February. Of course, the question is whether the Ukrainians are going to attack the territory of the Russian Federation once again, because we see that Ukrainians managed to accumulate significant number of drones as well. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 12 hours, we received lots of very interesting updates. And first, let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction. The first and the most important thing is that the commander-in-chief of the armored forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, visited command posts in the Gulay-Pole direction and announced successes. He stated that everything is according to his plan, most likely. But when talking about the situation on the ground, we see a gap between words of Alexander Syrsky and the current status of the line of combat contact. So first, let's talk about the western Zaporozhye direction. According to different sources, mainly according to pro-Russian sources, the armed forces of Ukraine during the previous nights tried to break through Russia's defense in the area of the city of Stepnogorsk and to answer the settlement by the name of Plavny. Several pro-Russian sources stated that Ukrainians managed to break through Russian defenses and to enter the northern part of the settlement of Stepnogorsk and to dig in deeper. But at the same time, pro-Russian sources stated that the vehicles that were involved in this counter-offensive operation were destroyed, but the Ukrainian soldiers managed to take under control some basements in the northern part of the city. Few more and several more pro-Russian reliable sources stated that the second group group of Ukrainians moved further in the southern direction, and as a result of this counter-offensive operation, the armed forces of Ukraine managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Plavny. So as of the beginning of the 17th of February of 2026, we haven't received anything. We're talking about videos that can confirm this, but once again, this information was provided by a very reliable source from the Russian side with 1.5 million subscribers. So he is completely pro-Russian. And if this information is true, of course, this means that the Ukrainians managed to cut the only supply line that the Russians used to have to support their contingent to the north of the settlement of Kamensk. We are talking about the territory between the villages of Stepnogorsk, Primorskaya, and of course the territory of Russia's breakthrough to in the northeastern direction. We are talking about this territory. So, and this is a very big problem for Russians if this information is correct, because now the Ukrainians will try to hold these lines and not to allow the Russians to bring additional forces to the north, while the main Ukrainian groups will try to recapture all these territories, and most likely in coming days we will see very heavy clashes in this area. Now the Russians are tasked to recapture this territory, the settlement of Plavny. If they can recapture the territory, then most likely the Russians will be able to stabilize the situation, but if not, then lots of problems may occur in this area. As for the eastern Zaporozhye direction, during the previous nights we haven't received almost anything, just several geolocations confirming the current line of combat contact, and that these territories are under complete Russian control. In this video we can see how Ukrainians attack a building in the western part of the city. This video confirms control over this territory by Russians, and another video was published to the east of the settlement of Varvarovka. Here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking tree lines positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation to the east of the river of Gaichur. So lots of artillery strikes took place along this tree line, which means that this tree line is also under complete Russian control, despite different rumors and statements and articles from pro-Ukrainian sources about another breakthrough of the armed forces of Ukraine in this direction. So as for the eastern Zaporozhye direction, we haven't been receiving anything for 36 hours already. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Dobropolye direction. The Russians continue their offensive operation, and the map, as you can see, has been adjusted in the southern part of the settlement of Grishina. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. According to this video, the Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in this stronghold. So lots of episodes were recorded through this dense network of the fortifications, which means that this territory is under complete Russian control. At the same time, the Ukrainians managed to recapture the territories around the settlement of Belitska. These are the changes on the ground between the dates. Yesterday, pro-Ukrainian sources reported that Russians improved their positions to the west of this road, but today we received a report from pro-Ukrainian sources that these gray zones were deleted, which means that Ukrainians managed to recapture them. As for the city of Konstantinovka, the Russians continue breaking through Ukraine's defense in the southwestern part of the city. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the moment when the Russians launched their offensive operation on the 12th of February of 2026. And this is the way how the map has been adjusted since the beginning of the 12th of February of 2026. As you can see, the Russians are about to establish complete control over the southwestern part of the settlement, including the most important Konstantinovka citadel, which is located in this area. As soon as the Russians establish complete control over everything along this red line, this is going to be a turning point in the battle for the city of Konstantinovka, without most likely any chances for Ukrainians to save control over the city in the future. As for the Slaviansk direction, during the previous 12 hours we haven't received anything special. As for the Kupiansk direction, the same story. As for the northern directions, during the previous 12 hours, additional changes have been recorded. The Russians, according to pro-Russian sources, during the previous night improved their positions in the area of the Volchansk foothold. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. Now the Russians are advancing in the southwestern direction with the purpose to establish complete control over the villages of Staritsa, Izbitska, Varvarovka, Ternova, Bayrak, Zumilivka, and Verkhny Saltov. But the most important task for Russians is to establish complete control over this huge forest. This is a very important position of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area, and if Ukrainians lose control over the forest, the Russians can use this forest to organize and to prepare themselves before further offensive operation with the support of drones in the direction of the city of Kharkiv. Because using these forests, the Russians will be able to begin launching drones deep inside of the Kharkiv region, especially to attack the city of Kharkiv itself. Furthermore, the Russians continue advancing along the river of Seversky Donets in the southern direction, and most likely in coming days we will receive a report that Russians, as a result of offensive, improved their position significantly around the settlement of Gravskaya. Another important area is the Sumy direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded around the settlement of Ryasnaya. This information was provided by a pro-Russian source. Additional changes on the ground were recorded around the villages of Kondratyevka and Novokonstantinovka. And the most important thing is that the Russians are keeping advancing in the most northern part of the Sumy region. Today, the Russians, according to pro-Russian sources, crossed the border between Russia and Ukraine in the area of the settlement of Tetkina, and the Russians began advancing in the area of the village by the name of Ryzhovka. So first buildings were captured by Russians. As of now, the Russians control just the most northern part of the settlement, but we believe that the Russians in this area are going to do the same thing as the Russians are doing in the area of the settlement of Krasnopolye. Very slowly, step by step, but every single day to improve their positions for 5-10 square kilometers. The Russians will slowly attack in this direction with the purpose probably to cut railways between the city of Kiev and the city of Sumy. We're talking about this territory. And another important thing, the Russians also improved their positions in the most northeastern part of the Sumy region along MO2 road along the border. Today, according to pro-Russian sources, the armed forces of the Russian Federation answered the village by the name of Kharkivka, which means that also in coming days, both the group of forces north and the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm this information. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.